So that bodes very well. Welcome to the annual Reimagine Europa Forum, which is back once again after a small hiatus in 2023. And have we been spoiled by the choice of location, location, location. That's what people say, it's everything. My name is Anthony, and I am a reimaginer. Now, I know this sounds a little bit like the start of a contribution to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and perhaps there are some parallels. But what brings me here is not a habit or an addiction that I want to kick or that I want to cure. I come to feed it. Let me tell you a little more, as I think it's important that I start, as we all mean to follow, by sharing my own experience, if you like, and journey. Now, I was fortunate with my first experience with Reimagine because it came to me. Now, I'm starting to sound biblical, but it's true. In 2018, President Giscard d'Estaing and Erica decided to hold their first forum at my place of work, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. At the time, I, along with many others, was immersed in trying to stem the tide of the post-truth era of mis- and disinformation in the aftermath of a personally and professionally painful Brexit and the emergence of populist politics on the back of very serious failings revealed by the global financial crisis of 2008, and these included the explosion of inequalities in our so-called rich and developed country universe. It was a time where the failings, the failures, and the weaknesses of our democratic construct were also all too evident in an era of digital transformation. And this drew me to Reimagine, to its task force on democracy, where we convened in Berlin, and I reconnected with Manuel Castells, who I had the pleasure to meet all too briefly in a quite wonderful year I spent at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles in 2002 to 2003. And I met a whole bunch of amazing people in Berlin. They included Maria Joao. I remember a wonderful conversation with you in the margins, and so many others. My most recent forum experience, as I think for all of you who were able to come to that, and I know that there are many who are new to this family, and a special welcome to all of you, was the forum that took place in 2022 in Brussels. So we went from Paris to Berlin to Brussels on emotions, narratives, and the future of the European Union. And as someone who spent 14 years working for the European Union, for the European Commission, and as someone who spent a lot of his time trying to get our world, a policy-making world, a world that I sometimes describe as solutionist, to embrace and understand all of our humanity, and that reason and emotion, in the positive sense of the word, have to be reconciled. The issues that we touched upon back in 2022 really spoke to me. And then in 2023, I decided to draw an end to a very long and rich cycle of 15 years at the OECD. And I was drawn again to Reimagine, this time with work that had been taken on by Erica and the team, in particular around depolarization, which is the subject that's going to occupy us today. And I was given the opportunity also to not only enjoy attending Reimagine events and participating, but joining the family. And I'm really delighted to form part of what is a wonderful team led by Erica and with the chairmanship of Maria Joao. And I'm here, as I think many of you are today, because I do believe in the power of going from dreams to reality. And I'm very excited about what we're going to do in the next couple of days. Someone came up to me just now and said, let's change the world. Now that can sound trite, but I think that is the reason why I got hooked on this project, and I think it's the reason why many of us are here. In a world where division seems to grow stronger by the day, it's imperative that we come together to confront the forces of polarization head on. This forum serves as a space where ideas can converge and where differences are not obstacles, but opportunities for growth. That growth comes from our diversity, not everyone thinking the same. Along this day, and we will engage in what I expect to be frank and candid discussions. We'll be challenging assumptions, exploring innovative solutions to the pressing issues that face Europe and the world today. It's an opportunity to listen to each other with open minds, open hearts, recognizing that true progress is born out of collaboration and cooperation. So together, let us reimagine Europa not as a continent divided, but as a beacon of unity, tolerance, and inclusivity. And let's dream of a Europe where dialogue triumphs over discord, where diversity is celebrated, and where solidarity knows no bounds. Thank you for joining us and being part of this vital conversation. And together we can shape a better tomorrow for generations to come. And now, without further ado, it's my privilege to introduce Reimagine's Chief Executive, Erika Steele von Holstein. I describe her as a woman on a mission to reimagine and depolarize. The floor is yours, Erika.
So let's just see. Is this coming? First of all, I want to welcome you all here to beautiful Lisbon, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to joining us here and to reimagine Europe. Some of you are long-term reimaginers. You have been partners for many years. You know our work very well. Others are less familiar with our work, but each and every one of you has a unique experience, expertise, and perspective that we find enormously valuable, and that will be very important in helping us shape the work we do and how we think about reimagining Europe. In 2014, President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing wrote a book with the former Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Schmidt, where they hoped and they argued that Europe was not a utopia. It was not a project that was ready or would ever finish. It was a project in constant movement, and it was for us, the future, to take care of it and to guide it in the way that we wanted. And already in 2014, we were having a lot of polarizing discourses. We could see in the horizon what was coming, and they really hoped that we could go beyond our political prejudices, beyond our fears, beyond our negative emotions, and build something that we could be proud of. 10 years later, we haven't really managed very well. 2014 seems like a dream scenario compared to today. And I think this is a little bit the paradox of our time, because we know already 10 years ago that we needed to adapt to the new world that was changing around us, the digital, global, highly mobile world that we were living in, with the climate crisis growing. Yet the political situation was already then so difficult that it was very impossible to actually move forward in the direction that was needed. And this is why we think polarization is the biggest challenge of our time. A couple of weeks ago at World Economic Forum, this was also brought up as one of the biggest challenges, and more this is coming up as a leading topic. And it's so effective because it manages to block any pathway forward, and it's being weaponized by actors who like the status quo and who think and who are benefiting from the fact that we cannot address the very real problems. And what we've been asking at Reimagine is, why is it so effective and what is really happening behind it? Because this is not only a trend in Europe, we're seeing it all over the world. And if something is happening all over the world in countries as different as Sweden, Brazil, and the United States, it's not about one politician or one policy or something going wrong. This is much deeper in society. And we came up with this analysis that we're calling the Cycle of Distrust, which looks at all the multifaceted aspect that is leading us to where we are today, starting with the fact that we have very real problems. This is data from the recent Eurobarometer report that shows what we've already seen. Around 21% of Europeans are at serious risk of poverty and social exclusion today, and nearly half of the households find it difficult to reach the end of the month. It's quite obvious that this is leading to emotions of insecurity, uncertainty, humiliation, fear, and anger. We're seeing it on the streets today. A couple of our guests are still blocked at Brussels airport or in other cities trying to fight the protests. But I think we need to be reminded of what Antonio Damasio said during our last annual forum, and that is, we are not rational beings who feel, but we are emotional beings who reason. Emotions are really important in this process. These emotions lead us to a crisis of trust. Why are we still having half of the households of Europe who are finding it difficult to reach the end of the month? If you look at this data, this is from the Edelman Trust Barometer 2024, so very recent data. There is not one European country on the blue, which is the trust. The Netherlands is on the neutral, everyone else is on the red. Sweden, who used to have we're there at number 49 in a nice big red color. So this is where we're feeling with trust. People are not trusting that we are able to actually find the solutions to the problems that they are dealing with. And that leads to protest movements. I don't think I need to say more. These are moving so fast in Europe right now, it's difficult to keep up with keeping them up to date. This was a couple of weeks ago, and already now I'd have to change all the protests. And it's a very different topic, whether it's housing crisis, it's farmers, it's anti-government protests, it's anti-extremism protests. This is then exacerbated by social media. The media ecosystem clearly has a role in this, but I think, at least what I see in Brussels, we make it a bit easy sometimes to blame the media. It's all Facebook's fault, and we think it's a little bit complex, more complex than that. Certainly, it acts as an accelerant, but again, there's something deeper. And now I want to give a big shout out to David Chavalarias and his team who are here with us today from the Institute of Complex Systems in Paris at CNRS. This is work they've done on looking at polarization and fragmentation in France. This is Twitter discourse up to 2022, when Twitter closed access to researchers, but you can very clearly see, so it's supposed to be a timeline, it's supposed to be very long, but we had to chop it up. 2016, I mean, and we know it was already not good then. That was Brexit, it was Trump being voted in, but the discourse was more or less what you could expect. So the darker the color, the more extreme, the lighter the color, the less extreme, left and right. 2022, you can see an enormous increase in the extreme dialogue. This leads to societal fragmentation, and this is the same data, and you can compare how it looked in 2016 to 2022. This data is wonderfully explained, by the way, in David's book, Toxic Data. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And today we are in that, and you can really see the shape, the format of the conversations have changed. And what we're arguing at Reimagine Europa, as a non-partisan think tank, is that the problem here is once you push the debate there, once you push it to the extremes, then you get political stalemate. This is data from France, but you can see similar trends all across Europe, and not only across Europe, but we're focusing on Europe here. And even if we don't have the data up here on the board, I think we can all recognize that in looking at the election results of different countries. We have minority governments, we have complex coalition governments, we even have one government who calls itself as an anti-coalition government currently in Europe. And the reason why this is very dangerous and why this makes it very hard is because once you have the debate there, you can't move forward. You cannot make the decisions to do the deep social and economic changes that we need to do to adapt to this world. And so we're stuck in this cycle of distrust. We're back, we can't address the real problems, and then the emotions get worse. And we've been here more or less since the financial crisis. And I think as we've all lived through it, we can recognize that this is happening and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So are we doomed? Are we doomed to be stuck in this era and just be continuing to see things worsening until there is an enormous crisis. At Reimagine Europa, we tend to want to come with a positive spin, and we want to hope that we have agency to shape our own future and to build it. And I think what we can see when we actually look at the problem is that the problem is not technological. It's not about the solution. The main problem is in here, and maybe a bit in here. The problem is the human and social one. How can we address this cycle of distrust? The Romans had a saying, divide et impera. This is more relevant today than maybe we would think. It maybe has a slightly different connotation because now it's about dividing in here, separating us to make sure that we cannot address the real problems. I mean, this has been recognized as a strategy by actors and governments who don't want us to move forward. But not wanted to talk about that. What if we turned the problem on its head? What if we thought we need to reimagine? We need to come with the new ideas, but we don't have the new ideas. I mean, that's one of the problems. We don't know how to deal with the AI. We've never had to do that as humans. AI didn't exist. How do we solve the housing crisis? How do we deal with increasing inequality whilst the world is getting richer and richer? So admitting that is a key point to change not only our minds, but our mindsets. The current debate is all about winning, and I see that talking a lot. It's about how do we beat this, or how do we beat those, irrelevant of what side you're on. And what we're arguing is that we need to move from trying to win a debate to trying to start a conversation. And the best way of starting a conversation is not by talking, but actually by listening. So how do we do this? And in this case, and I think this is a core point that we want to bring, is diversity and conflict is actually a strength. If we manage to depolarize, the fact that we disagree, the fact that we don't know and that we have different, is the biggest strength to find the best new solutions to deal with the very real problems that we have. All research in collective intelligence shows that the most important element of developing new ideas in a group is how diverse it is. And Europe there is in all of a sudden, what seems as our biggest weakness, and I think we've all heard about this, we're going to discuss about democracy today, is that democracy, we're doing it because it's our values and because it's the right thing to do, but it's also a weakness because look how polarizing we are and how difficult it is to move things forward. But if you turn it around, it's our biggest strength. Because if we can manage to get all people with different perspectives to talk together, to try to understand each other, why do you think differently? Why is it that you don't see it as I do? We can come up with the real solutions to deal with that. And democracy is best placed, and of course, Europe is particularly well placed. It's even one of our mottos, united in diversity. And at Reimagine, we say strength in diversity. So we will argue that we do have to do democracy, not because it's the ethical thing to do. There's also a value point, but it's because it's the smart thing to do. So how do we do this? How do we move from all of these conversations blocking us and not getting us forward to making us move forward? So I've had an enormous privilege from the beginning because President Giscard d'Estaing really recognized the need and the importance of narratives and visions in building a future, to have an in-house narrative team from the get-go, led by Professor Andrej Novak, who is our chief narrative scientist, with our contemporary mythology scholar, Professor Marcin Napiórkowski. And we have developed an innovative narrative approach, taking insights from the best from not only psychology and philosophy, but also behavioral science, neuroscience, sociology, and many different sciences, because we've had decades of research showing us how our brains work, how our emotions work, how they impact decisions. And I'd like to just say a little caveat. When we talk about narratives at Reimagine, we don't mean what you often hear in the political discourse. It's not a spin, but it's about, in the scientific way, narratives is the way that the brain takes information and organizes it. So if you think of facts as, or information as words, narratives are the sentences. So we all have narratives, because otherwise we couldn't put the words. It's depending on where do we put the words. Are they objects? Are they subjects? What's the action? Changes the meaning of the facts. But this is very important to realize, because what we've done is we said, how can we use narratives to our advantage as opposed to our disadvantage. And what can we learn? Wittgenstein said, very important, that an atheist and a believer can rarely have a real conversation because they use the same words, but they mean different things. They have different perspectives, so they talk around each other all the time. And I feel, and I think anyone who has been on Twitter recognizes that this is what we're doing all the time. We're talking around each other, we're tilting at windmills, we're spending a lot of energy not having a conversation. So we've developed a REFRAME methodology based on this, and this has proven so effective that actually earlier this year we launched the first European Narrative Observatory, combating disinformation and polarization in Europe systemically. It is a mouthful, I know, but we love acronyms in Brussels. And it's co-funded by the European Union as a pilot project, and we have lots of wonderful partners who are helping us in this. And what we managed to do with this, which is very exciting, is we can create a value-neutral map on any issue, understanding what are the different narrative communities and why do they think in one way or another. And this allows us to create a kind of translation option from one perspective to another, and we will be using this later today. But another thing that Nodes allows us to do, which I find personally very exciting, but this is to identify where we're thinking wrong. We have our brains. Now that AI is out there, we hear a lot of complaints that we don't know how AI thinks. There's the black box systems. And we fail to remember that our brains work in exactly the same way. We often don't know how we arrive at certain conclusions. We think they're very rational, but if we actually start analyzing, we see certain patterns are not always very clear to say, why do we think one way or why do we think another? And this is particularly true when it comes to moral judgment. To give an example of this, we studied earlier this year, we did an overview of narratives around climate change, which is a growing polarizing topic, and it's set to be one of the most polarizing topics for the next European Parliament. And we see that there are two patterns that that I would say 6 out of 7 of the narrative communities have, that are leading us down rabbit holes in thinking. The first one is that it's a debate between people versus planet. So either you're on the planet side or you're on the people side. You can already hear that the setup of the narrative is very polarizing. And it's not a very useful one because we know that we are trying to save the planet for the people. The planet will be fine without us. It will probably be better without us, to be honest. But it's our habitat. And for our habitat to work, we need biodiversity. We need all these things. But the fact that it's built in this way is making it easy to polarize and easy for very important values on both sides to clash. The second element, and this is present in most of the debates that we see on any topic, and that is, to do good, we necessarily have to suffer. This is a very Christian format of a storyline. And this is also very dangerous. On the one hand, it makes all the debate around climate change be about who should pay, whilst we know that on the facts is we're trying to do it now as an insurance policy so we don't have to pay much, much more later, and that this is the sensible thing to do. But it leads us down discussions and debates and formats on this that actually don't fit reality and that make it very easy to polarize, because this is a very moralizing structure. Migration has exactly the same kind of topic. And in fact, the fact that we are building the climate debate on these types of narratives is making it very easy to polarize. Many of the protest movements have actually moved from trying to polarize the migration debate, where now all political parties have strong positions and have worked for 10 years to build up that, to moving the debate to climate change, because it's so easy to polarize because of the structure of how we've built the debate. And we need to be aware of this, because this is very deep ingrained in how our brains work. So the first point of our REFRAME methodology is responsive listening. Learn how to listen, learn how to hear the other person, and also to hear what your own narratives are saying, both in the right and in the wrong. The second one is language. Language is very powerful. Words that can have positive connotations for us can have very negative connotations for somebody else, and we need to be aware of that, because a simple thing like, for instance, in a progressive or innovation positive world, something like a revolutionary or transformative technology is a positive thing. On the other side, it's very, very scary. You don't have to say more than that, and you have a lot of concern. The third element is focus on shared objectives. And this seems like an obvious thing, but often we are stuck tilting at windmills. We're focusing on the highly polarizing and we're trying to win a moral argument. Mario from JRC, yesterday he presented us some work that JRC are doing on this. It's very exciting, and he'll be talking also later this afternoon on the work that they're doing, and particularly on the point of more moralizing and how that creates by default a highly polarized debate. Mandela used these techniques in changing the conversation with the Afrikaners. This is how effective these techniques are. And again, I want to point out, we always say it's about changing the conversation and not changing your mind. It's not about adopting another person's perspective, but it's about understanding why they have that perspective. In a time when he had already won the global moral debate for his cause, he decided to change strategy because he saw that actually continuing with that strategy wasn't leading him anywhere. Actually, it was getting worse. Things were getting harsher. It was just polarizing the debate. So what he did is he read all the history and understood why. Why is it so hard for the Africans to give an inch? We have nothing, they have everything. And all of a sudden, he read, it wasn't about how they were framing it, about racism or these. It was about a fear of becoming a minority. He still didn't agree with them. It wasn't about changing his mind, but he could understand why they were afraid. So you're creating a bridge, a narrative bridge of saying, now we can change the conversation. How do we make sure to give you the assurances so we can have what we want? That is very, very effective. It seems like such a little thing, but it can change the whole debate of a nation. Mandela also used the last one, which is recognize shared humanity. And that is understand that probably the other side, whatever side you're on, is not trying on purpose to be evil. We often shape debates that way. It's how fairy tales are built, and that is the other side. Somehow they're just born evil. That's not true at all. We're all humans. We all want to be good. At least I would say a vast majority of us. I'm not going to answer for every single human. But trying to understand that and treat the other's concerns with respect is a core element for any dialogue. Adapt clear guidelines. This is quite simple. We'll be using that today. Merge and solve, so move from the highly polarizing debate to smaller things that you can deal with. We've done a lot of work on agriculture, for instance, and new technologies in agriculture. And what we saw there is, even though the debate is highly polarizing, and I think you can see that just looking on the newspapers today, that this is known as the apple of discord of European politics, agriculture, that actually 85 or 90% of the objectives of both sides were very similar. Everyone wants to support small and medium-sized farmer. Everyone wants European citizens to have affordable food. Everyone wants to have healthy food. The question is, how can we organize this in a different way, and how can we work together to move that? And that comes to the last point. And this is evolve collective stories. And this is why we're here today. Because with all of this data behind it, with all of these things of where we're thinking wrong, how to change the way we think, this is what we're going to try to do today, and that is to reimagine how we think about these issues. Are the stories we're telling ourselves actually helpful in bringing us towards where we want to go? We have identified 6 priority areas that have come from talking with our partners. It has also come from talking with citizens. We've had citizen dialogues. A few of you were a part of our first citizen dialogue in Barcelona, held last year with the Spanish presidency. We're going to really work together, and we're hoping that you're going to disagree and that you're going to come in there with open minds and dare to disagree with other people and try to start thinking differently. There is no better city to be in to do this kind of work than here in Lisbon. Many centuries ago, as you know, this city launched the era of the big discoveries, because they realized in a time when everyone was trying to get to Asia and the Silk Route was not the best way, there was a lot of difficulty getting there, instead of trying to find a different land route, what if we completely change the perspective, look out over the horizon and take a different approach? What can the oceans do? And we're hoping that today we will use exactly this to change the approach and say, instead of being stuck in these quagmires and tilting at windmills and fighting about the same things and framing the debate as we've done for the past 20 years, What if we radically think about it differently? Can we then reimagine things? Maybe the oceans of today are AI, maybe it's quantum computing, maybe it's something completely different. But the point is that we are the ones who decide where we're going and where the future holds. And to be able to do that, to be able to reimagine Europe, we need to depolarize so we can create this future that we want. So thank you all very much for being here and for taking the time to help with this thing. What we are going to be doing in the next couple of days is going to shape how we work at Reimagine on these things for at least the next year. And hopefully it will change the way we think, going away from trying to win a debate to trying to start a conversation, going away from trying to convince people that you're right to opening up to listening. And maybe that will take us to a new era of discoveries. Thank you very much.
Erika, thank you very much indeed. I think you've lit the fire. One of the things, I had the fortune to talk to Erika about how she was going to kick things off today, and I think you can feel the passion and the emotion in there. You've got the reason in there as well, and I think one of the most important things is that we've got as she said, a map, and we have a job to do perhaps to start using that now. So it's a damn sight easier if you kick off with the sense that you have tools to be able to help you embark on this journey. And what you said about Lisbon and what they managed to do here at a certain point in time, which completely changed the course of history, that's something really exciting as well. I opened up right at the beginning, and I'm keen for people here to do likewise now. We've got a few minutes before we start with the working groups. I'll mention a little bit about that later on. But I'm keen for those who have any reactions, any commentary. It doesn't have to be questions. It's what you have inside in terms of what you've listened to so far, why you've come, if you've got expectations, for you to share a little bit of that with us now. And a very important element, I think we've got microphones in the back, so those of you who are feeling a bit less timid, stick your hands up. The philosophy of this event is also that everybody's here on an equal footing. There isn't hierarchy. There aren't some people who are more important than others or that should take the floor and others not. And we are all here to listen to each other. So the interesting thing here as well is to listen to voices that perhaps are not so often heard in these quarters. So I'm hoping that we have elicited something from you. And I'm keen to see, I think Gustavo, I'm seeing motioning. Gustavo Cardozo, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's not an easy task to comment on such a presentation like the one that Erika brought us here today, but I would like to maybe give my contribution. I am a media scholar, although sociologist by training. I was thinking on the conceptual mapping that we saw here, that has at the center. Conceptual maps can be from different shapes, a square, a circle, whatever, triangle. Here we have a circle, and in the circle we have two dimensions in the middle. One of them is the problems, and the other one is social media. I think it's not by hazard that happens there. It's really because we are not just living in times of crisis in terms of economic or distrust, etc. We are going through also times of communicational crisis. What does that mean? It means that the way in which we used to work or do things no longer attains the same kind of objectives that we had envisaged before. So things no longer work the same way. We have to change. It's not only about the narratives that we are trying to find here, we also must understand, between commas, that the narratives in communication have also changed. Back in 1969, the time when I was born, a Canadian scholar, McLuhan, used to put forward the motto, "The media is the message." I dare to defy that today, 55 years more or less onwards, by saying that we are living through a time where the motto must be "people are the message." Meaning that when people don't agree with the message that they receive, they remix, resignify it, change it to whatever they think is their core belief. So it's not just about finding the narratives, it's also trying to think, how can we find a narrative that fits into a big common approach that is able to put people thinking about something and at the same time accepting it, changing it in their perspective, but not counteracting against it. And this is just a kickoff, because we don't have the solution for the problems, otherwise we wouldn't be here, we would be implementing the solution. So I think it's time to hear other people and move onwards with the two-day talk and work that we have ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please mention who you are when you take the
floor. Szymon Malinowski. I work in climate, so I'm not a social scientist. And I just wanted to put one thing here. The only presence of physical world, of what's acting on us and what receives answer from our action, which shapes the world, was real problems in this circle. We completely forget about physical limitations and the physical world which is influencing very hard pressure on us. And this is something missing in this scheme, that we are limited in our answers by possibilities and by limits imposed by nature. And I'm afraid that if we will not introduce this element to our actions, to convince people, to reunite people, to do better Europe and better world, we will never achieve this. And I'm afraid we are missing this problem.
Thank you very much indeed.
No, I just wanted to quickly say I fully agree that there obviously are limitations, but I was so impressed with what we saw happening during the COVID crisis, where in 9 months we managed to achieve what usually would take 5 to 10 years. And I think we are in a place today, bizarrely, where the world is richer than ever before. We have more technology, we have more information, we have more knowledge. And yet we still cannot achieve the goals because somehow we cannot agree. And I think that ideas are the most powerful things that humans have. It can make us work, hundreds of millions of people towards the same goal in a completely uncoordinated way. And then, of course, there are the realities. And I think the climate crisis is a core issue because it will change the situation, the real things. The real problems will just grow and grow. But to solve those problems, we have a lot of the solutions already. The problem isn't, the technologies and the ideas are there, but we need to be able to coordinate humans well enough to be able to move forward. And so it's not about saying that these are not there, absolutely, because they are there in the possible solutions. But we're even further behind that because we know what we need to do. And somehow we're stuck in this debate. So I fully agree with you. And I think we need to see how do we make sure that humans can react quicker to these very pressing problems as opposed to, tilting at these famous windmills.
Eric, if you can hand the mic to that gentleman. I think you had your hand up, didn't you? Yes. I think we've got time for one more comment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Erika Helfried Karl, my name. I'm a trained diplomat, but now I'm a democracy activist. I found this very convincing, what you said. Obviously, as a diplomat working on conflict resolution, some of these things are actually things that you do on an international level. But I also have to say that I think describing the problem or describing the narratives that we are against, working against, is very important in terms of the analysis, because it also shapes our solution to a certain extent. I read a book yesterday which basically confirms most of the thesis you put forward on an empirical basis. It's called Trigger Points. It's a new book by 3 German sociologists who found out also that basically, if you look behind the narratives, you see that the population in Germany, at least, is much more united than you would think. My point is, they describe this issue about the debate on climate crisis not as something that is putting people versus planet, but today versus tomorrow. And I think this is maybe also linking to what you have said, you know, it's people who are conscious of the physical limitations. These are the tomorrow people, and people who have to struggle to survive today. And I think, or which only want to think about today. And I think this is probably a more accurate way to think about this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, gentleman at the back.
My name is Christoph Glauser from Switzerland. We have a democracy that is working quite well. I didn't see Switzerland on the list, how low or how high it was. We are trying to speed up democracy also in Switzerland, but it's sometimes not just depolarizing, it's also polarizing. So democracy has different ideas. You might like them or not, but you need to discuss them, of course. Thank you for Erika's and team, you know, preparing so well. I'm looking forward to the discussions in the groups. But I think we need to be a little bit optimistic. If you look at the room here, you know, the ceiling, what we have in Europe, you know, we have so many nice and beautiful things. We have some functioning democracies. Some of them are functioning better than others. But I'm a political scientist, and I still try to stay optimistic as good as I can, because we need to talk about the opportunities and the chances of accelerating democracy in Europe, instead of just always pointing out the many risks we have and the difficult situations and problems. We have them, yes, but I think we need also a little twist, you know, to change our mind into more optimistic democracy coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman here in the middle, if someone can get him the mic quickly. I think I'm going to have to draw the line there. You've all suddenly got excited, which is brilliant, but...
Okay, so...
Maria wants to come in as well. Jolly good, okay. Whoever it is, don't blame me on the timing. Katerina, you're going to give us 5 more minutes? Okay. Phew.
Hello, so I'm Pierre-Louis Giscard d'Estaing, so I work in a French bank in France, and so I'm actually very interested by this explanation on the depolarizing Europe, because it's extremely crucial. We might think, we might think, of course, it's something important. We might not necessarily realize how crucial it is, considering how weak sometimes our democracies can be. Also follow a lot of what's going on in the United States. And if we complain about polarization in Europe, we have to realize what's going on in the United States. For the very first time in 150 years, there are now active research and discussions about if there might be potentially in the next 10 years a civil war in the United States, something that would have never happened, and that hasn't happened in 150 years, because the US society is so polarized, because we've so over-emotionalized narratives, and notably, I think a pretty important aspect that was mentioned was notably the sort of the moralization aspect that we see a lot in narratives, that we see from extremists, but also from people fighting extremists. We see a lot of trying to moralize everything, and it might be something that might weaken a lot and makes everything quite moralized. So that's why notably I'm also part of a project called Palumba, where we're trying to help to try to help maybe for the next elections, maybe young Europeans realize what exactly are the positions factually of each political party, instead of relying on sort of the narratives of different media, social media, and things like that, where we can see objectively for example, on an application, what can they do. So I thank you everybody here to think about those subjects, because it's really important for the future of Europe. Thank you.
Okay. This feels like an auction. David.
Oh, okay. So I'm yet another optimist militant, let's say, here. And my name is Paul Villaverde, and I'm the founder and president of Palumba EU with Pierre-Louis and all of these young people here. And I wanted to introduce the generational element to the conversation, which may be relevant as well. We heard a lot of interesting points, but I think that there is some relevance in trying to see how different generations speak to each other and how we come together in order to have more productive action-oriented conversations in this. And Erica mentioned it, and I think Manuel Castells also has this quote saying something like, Europe is in danger because of a lack of ideas. And we believe we kind of have one, and we are trying to make it happen. It's about, as Pierre-Louis was mentioning, doing a voting advice application which is youth-oriented and tries to depolarize in a way as well, and especially to spark real, honest conversations between friends and young people about European level of politics. We're very excited to be here, and we hope to keep this conversation going. And we'll also be joining all of the sessions, so we're very excited about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. David. You're going to get me in trouble. Okay, you're the last bid over there, Peter. He's got a nice smile. Go on.
Yeah, just a quick remark, because David Chavalarias, so I have the chance to be mentioned our work from Erica. Just to give a precision, we are talking about polarizing and the depolarizing discourse. But what the research that Erica shows demonstrate, and we have a paper published just yesterday, is that the conception of the infrastructure of the digital spaces like Twitter, Facebook, etc., we know that what they implement inside the machinery of their systems necessarily leads to polarization and more toxic content. We have demonstrated that the way they organize information add 50% of more toxic content globally to the user. So this is one of the causes of this, not only the only one, but one of the causes. We know that the way they are implemented leads to polarization and more toxic content. So now there is the DSA, the DMA regulation, but this is really something that we should not forget. It is really the way we communicate that is failed already.
Thank you. And the lady in the front. And with that, I'm closing the bidding.
Yes. Good morning. Congratulations, Erica. To be with these clever people is very good because intelligence sticks. So, listen, my view is that sometimes we don't look to the governments and how Europe is behaving. I have been 15 years in the parliament, and I believe that the speed of changes, some that come from outside like climate changes, but another comes from the not technology. I believe that people is not against technology. It's against some impacts that have the technology. And many years ago, in the perhaps last century, Europe at the beginning looked a lot about the impact assessment of the policies. But now the speed of changes are so big that the society cannot swallow and digest the changes. Many enterprises need to close because the environment issues, the impact is so strong that they cannot support them. Agriculture has become a bureaucracy. They need many papers to justify the policy. Europe, at the same time, is not applying what we call the reciprocity to the other things. And we have a contradiction, for instance, with the new document about the relation with Morocco. It's very good for the Venetian enterprise because they can sell the European cars, they can sell the fish, but at the same time, the agriculture is losing always. We, in Europe, the agriculture need to apply the impact issues, but at the same time, the import products, they have not done. So they lose competitivity. So people's feeling is afraid. And you have there to be afraid about changes. And that for me is very important. We need to come back to the idea of impact assessment about all the policies that we do in Europe. Thank you.
Maria Joao, you've got the last word.
Thank you very much, and thank you all of you, because this was a great start for our debate. This shows the potential of all this community which is together in Lisbon. I'm the chair of the advisory board of Reimagine Europa. I'm Lisbon born, I'm living in Lisbon. I can tell you Lisbon is really a place of inspiration. So let's make the best of us being together. And let me just come with a single message, is that by coincidence today, the European Council is meeting in Brussels, dealing with a very complex situation. And let's see, the decisions will come. But we really believe that part of the solution depends on our capacity to develop a method to co-create a new narrative. This is what's at stake in this meeting. So we count on all of you. We have a great composition, and I'm sure that throughout this conference we'll come with something really valuable for the European project. So, Anthony, this is your turn now.
Thank you very much, Maria Joao. Apologies to Peter. I owe you one, and you'll get the floor in the appropriate moment. We've heard some fantastic elements here that we need to keep very clearly in our mind. People are the message, not the media. Don't forget the physical limitations. We can talk a lot about mental, but there's a lot on the physical side. That makes me think of geography. What are we up against? Let's be very aware of what we're up against and the deliberate addition of toxicity there, intergenerational elements. Make sure that we remember the glass half full, not just half empty. Temporal elements about the digestion of change and the inability to do so. So I think we're going to hold all of these thoughts as we go through the work of the day. And now, very quickly, we're going to move into the three groups that have been established on deliberative democracy, agriculture, and Europe in the world. If you are attending deliberative democracy, follow me. If you know where you're going, fine. If you don't, follow me, and I hope I know where I'm going, because it's not here. The other two groups will indeed be here on the ground floor of the hotel, Europe in the world, and agriculture will be here once we've stepped out of here quite quickly, had a quick coffee, and then we'll be able to reconvene. So on that happy note, off we go to work. Thank you.